Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Always excited to dig in.
Great. So today we're looking at Philippians 3:12 to 14.
Oh, a classic.
Right. I bet most folks listening know this one by heart.
Probably preach on it pretty regularly, too.
Exactly. So we're not doing basic commentary here. Our sources, AI analysis of how other pastors are preaching on this.
Sounds fascinating, like a peek into each other's sermon notes.
That's the idea. You know the verse, but what are the freshest, most unexpected takes out there? That's our mission today.
Makes you wonder, what haven't we thought of yet?
Right. And one thing that jumped out from all these different sermons was how many focused on spiritual growth.
Makes sense. That's a core theme for Paul.
But not as a destination, more like a constant process.
Yeah, it's that I press on toward the goal kind of thing, not I've arrived.
And to drive that home, a lot of sermons used metaphors.
Metaphors, always helpful.
But some were pretty out there.
Yeah.
Like FBC of El Campo, they had this whole driving analogy.
Oh, I've heard that one.
Focus on the windshield, not the rearview mirror.
Love that. Leaving the past behind, looking ahead to what God's got in store, like forgetting what's behind in the verse.
But not ignoring our past completely.
Of course not. Just not letting it define us.
This made me think, for those listening, when did you get stuck dwelling on something that was over and done?
Ooh, good question. We all do it, right?
And how did that affect your ability to, move forward in your faith?
Powerful stuff. These metaphors, they're not just clever, they make you really think.
Okay, so car metaphors, cool.
Yeah.
But South Henderson Pentecostal Holiness Church, they went with electrical impedance.
Impedance, that's new.
Basically spiritual resistance,
Mhm.
blocking our connection with God.
Whoa. I like that. Like, there are obstacles to our relationship with God, things that make it harder to hear his voice, you know?
And it's that I press on thing again. There's effort involved, like overcoming that resistance.
Absolutely. Almost like a spiritual checkup, what's causing the static.
Is it unforgiveness, pride, being too busy?
Could really resonate with folks today. We're all used to troubleshooting tech issues.
Exactly. That's what's so cool about these weird metaphors. They take ancient truths and make them modern. All right, one more that blew my mind. The collective church. They went with a buffet.
A buffet. Okay, gotta hear this.
Desiring all that God offers.
Ah, I get it. Not settling for just a little taste of God's goodness, right?
Yeah. Like, who doesn't love a buffet?
Yeah.
But seriously, are you settling for a spiritual snack when God's offering a feast?
Makes you think, what am I missing out on? What aspects of God's character or his promises am I neglecting?
So we've got the metaphors down.
Great metaphors, really unique.
But they're not just abstract ideas. The sermons we looked at, they took them further with illustrations.
You know, that's where it gets real, right? It takes those ideas and shows them in action.
For example, Riverbend Church had this story. A guy makes an amazing catch, legendary baseball play.
Oh, I can see where this is going.
But then he spends the rest of his life trying to relive that one moment, clinging to the past, missing out on new opportunities.
That's so relatable. We've all been tempted to do that, haven't we? Hold on to past successes or dwell on past failures.
And it's back to the car metaphor, right?
Yeah.
He's staring in the rearview mirror, missing the whole road ahead.
And that's the power of a good illustration. It drives the point home. It makes you think, oh, that's me.
Another one that caught my eye was from Connection Church Spearfish. They used an Olympic race,
Okay, I've heard a lot of Olympic race analogies.
but with a twist. They said in the Christian race, everyone with faith in Jesus wins.
Ooh, I like that. Takes the pressure off a little, doesn't it?
It does. Because sometimes it feels like I'm tripping over my own feet in this race.
Exactly. It reminds us that we're not competing against each other. We're all on the same team, running toward the same finish line.
And speaking of stumbling and getting back up, one thing that came up a lot in these sermons, spiritual growth isn't always easy.
Right. There's effort, discipline, sometimes even pain involved.
And that's where understanding the historical context of Philippians 3:12 to 14 is so important.
Oh, absolutely.
Paul's writing from prison, facing persecution. He's not talking about growth from a place of comfort.
He gives it a whole new weight, doesn't it? He's speaking from experience.
It's easy to romanticize spiritual growth.
But it's not always pretty.
Exactly. And I think that's an important message for us to convey. We don't have to sugarcoat it,
Right. It's okay to acknowledge the challenges, the doubts, the times we feel like we're failing.
because that's where the real growth happens, right? When we push through those tough moments, lean into God's grace.
When we allow him to refine us through the fire.
This reminds me of a sermon from Regeneration Calvary Chapel. They really stressed knowing Christ not just about him.
That's a profound distinction.
It's easy to get caught up in theology, but true growth goes deeper.
It's about that personal encounter with Jesus, feeling his love and grace.
It makes me think about those times I was so busy studying the Bible
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
that I neglected my own relationship with God. Like I was learning about him, but not really knowing him.
We've all done that at some point. It's a good reminder that growth isn't just about knowledge, it's about intimacy.
So how do we move from head knowledge to heart knowledge?
Good question. Well, these sermons offered some practical insights. For example, Living Hope Church talked about surrender.
Surrender. It's easy to say the words, but
But what does it actually look like in our lives?
right. It's choosing obedience over what we want,
Huh.
saying yes to God even when we don't get it.
Letting go of control, trusting God knows what's best.
Okay, surrender is key.
Hmm.
What else did we see in these sermons?
Well, Riverbend Church also brought up the importance of intentionality.
Intentionality. You mean like making time for prayer and Bible study?
Exactly. Being proactive in our faith, making a conscious effort to connect with God every day.
And it's not just about our growth, is it? We lead our congregations on this journey too.
Absolutely. And the collective church used a great metaphor for that. Motion. We need to be in motion as a church.
In motion. I like that. So we're not just called to stand still.
Exactly. It's about constantly moving forward, adapting to the needs of our communities, and finding new ways to share the gospel.
So how do we embrace that motion without getting overwhelmed or losing focus?
That's where discerning God's will comes in. It's about seeking his guidance, aligning our actions with his purposes.
Not just being busy for the sake of it.
Right. Being intentional, strategic, not just reacting to everything.
And being willing to step outside our comfort zones, embrace new challenges.
Trusting God will equip us for the journey.
This brings us back to that windshield metaphor. It's not just about us looking ahead. It's about leading our congregations with vision.
Helping them to see the possibilities God has for us as a community.
So we've covered a lot. Metaphors, illustrations, historical context. But here's a question for you listening. What's one action step you can take this week based on what we've talked about?
It could be personal or for your ministry. Maybe commit to deeper prayer or finally pick up that book you've been meaning to read.
Maybe you try one of these metaphors in your next sermon or Bible study.
Whatever it is, don't let this deep dive be just another podcast. Let it spark real change and growth for you in your ministry.
Absolutely. And speaking of sparking change, I want to go back to something from FBC of El Campo. That rear view mirror being so much smaller than the windshield,
Oh yeah, that visual was powerful.
it's like a reminder of where our focus should be. It's easy to get caught looking back at our mistakes, our successes, our hurts.
But that rearview mirror is tiny for a reason.
Exactly. It helps us learn from the past, but it's not where our eyes should stay.
And that's where the windshield comes in, right? It's about the possibilities ahead, the adventures yet to come.
And it's not just about our individual journey. We have the privilege of helping our congregations shift their focus too.
To see the vastness of God's grace, the incredible journey that's still ahead.
And that's what's so exciting about Philippians 3:12-14. It's not just about personal piety.
It's an adventure, a call to embrace the unknown, to step out in faith, trusting God's with us.
Beautifully said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Philippians 3:12-14. Hope you got some fresh insights for your life and ministry.
And remember, we're in this together, supporting and encouraging each other along the way,
Maybe one of your sermons or Bible studies will be someone else's aha moment.
helping them see this passage in a whole new light.
Until next time, keep pressing on, keep seeking, keep growing. You never know what you'll find on the road ahead.
Right. It's like he's so focused on that one catch, he can't even see the game anymore.
Exactly. And that's where a good illustration really shines. It takes these ideas and makes them real, makes you feel them.
Right. Another illustration I loved was from Connection Church Spearfish. They talked about an Olympic race.
Okay, I've heard a lot of Olympic race analogies.
But this one was different. They said, in the Christian race, everyone who has faith in Jesus, they already won the prize.
Oh, that's beautiful. It takes the pressure off, you know?
It does. Because honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm tripping over my own shoelaces in this race. Me too. And it reminds us we're not competing against each other. We're on the same team, running towards the same goal.
Speaking of stumbling,
Hmm?
one thing that really stood out in these sermons was this acknowledgement that spiritual growth, it's not always a walk in the park.
No, it's not. It takes effort, discipline. Sometimes it even hurts.
And that's where the historical context for Philippians 3:12-14, it becomes so important.
Oh, absolutely.
Remember, Paul's writing from prison, persecution, uncertain future, the whole bit. He's not talking about growth from, like, a beach resort.
Right. It gives his words so much more weight.
It's easy to think of spiritual growth as this, like, beautiful, effortless thing.
But the truth is, it's not always pretty.
And that's something we need to be honest about, right?
Absolutely. We don't need to sugarcoat it for people.
Acknowledge the struggles, the doubts, the times we mess up.
Because that's where the real growth happens, isn't it? Pushing through those hard parts, leaning on God's grace.
Letting him shape us,
Right.
even when it's tough.
Exactly. This reminds me of a sermon from Regeneration Calvary Chapel. They talked about really knowing Christ.
Not just knowing about him.
Right. That's huge.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in theology and doctrine.
But true growth, it's deeper than that.
It's about experiencing Jesus personally, feeling his love, his grace, letting that change you.
You know, it makes me think about those times I was so focused on studying
Been there.
that I kind of forgot to actually spend time with God.
It's easy to do. We get so caught up in learning about him, we forget to actually know him.
Exactly. So how do we bridge that? How do we go from head knowledge to heart knowledge?
These sermons had some practical ideas, like Living Hope Church. They emphasized surrender.
Surrender, that's a big one.
Well, what does it actually look like in our lives?
Yeah, it's more than just saying the words.
It's about saying yes to God, even when we don't understand. It's about letting go of our own plans.
And trusting his.
Exactly.
Okay, so surrender. What else stood out to you?
Riverbend Church had a good point about intentionality. Spiritual growth, it doesn't just happen.
So we have to make it happen.
Well, we have to be intentional about it. Make space for it in our lives. Develop those habits that help us connect with God.
Like having a regular prayer time, Bible study, being out in nature, things like that.
Exactly. It's about being proactive, choosing to connect with God every day instead of just waiting for it to happen.
And it's not just about our own growth, is it?
No, it's not. We're called to lead our congregations on this journey too.
And speaking of leading, the collective church had this awesome metaphor. They called it motion.
Motion.
They said we need to be in motion as a church, constantly moving forward, adapting to the needs of our community.
Finding fresh ways to share the gospel.
I love that. We're not meant to just stand still. We're meant to move. But how do we do that without getting, like, scattered and overwhelmed?
That's where it comes back to discerning God's will. It's not about being busy just to be busy.
Right. It's got to be about something bigger.
It's about listening to God, making sure our actions line up with his purpose.
So it's not just about doing more. It's about doing the right things.
Exactly. And it's about being willing to try new things. Step outside our comfort zone, trusting that God's got us.
You know, that reminds me of the windshield metaphor again. It's not just about looking ahead ourselves. It's about leading others with that vision.
Helping them see the potential, the possibilities that God has in store.
So we've talked about a lot today. Metaphors, illustrations, historical context. But here's the big question for you listening. What's one concrete thing you can do this week because of what we've talked about?
It could be something personal or something for your ministry.
Maybe it's committing to a deeper prayer life or finally picking up that commentary you've been meaning to read.
Or try using one of these metaphors in your next sermon.
Right. See how it lands. But whatever it is, don't just listen and forget.
Let this spark some real change for you, for your ministry.
I love that. And speaking of sparking change, I want to circle back to FBC of El Campo. That whole thing about the rearview mirror being so much smaller than the windshield.
Oh, yeah, that one stuck with me too.
It's such a powerful visual, right? Because it's so easy to get stuck looking back.
At our past mistakes, our past successes, even our past hurts.
But that rearview mirror, it's tiny for a reason.
It's there to help us learn from the past, not live in it.
Exactly. The windshield, that's where our focus needs to be.
It's about the wide open possibilities ahead, the adventures God has waiting for us.
And it's not just about our own journey either. As pastors, as leaders, we get to help our congregations shift their focus too.
Help them see the amazing things God has in store, if they're willing to press on with him.
And that's what's so exciting about this passage, this whole idea of pressing on. It's not just about being good, it's about adventure.
It's about trusting God enough to step into the unknown.
And knowing he's got us every step of the way. So well said. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Philippians 3:12-14.
Hope you found some new insights to take back to your ministry.
And remember, this journey, it's not a solo mission.
We're all in it together, supporting each other, encouraging each other along the way.
Who knows? Maybe your next sermon will be the one that sparks someone's aha moment.
Helps them see this familiar passage with fresh eyes.
So until next time, keep pressing on, keep seeking, keep growing.
You never know what amazing things are waiting for you just around the bend.
See you next time.